ruler of the Blood Angels and bringer of Sanguinius's light, Commander Dante is among the oldest living Space Marines and the longest serving chapter master. In this guide, we'll show you how to prepare this legend to lead your forces against their foes on the battlefield. And we'll also be showing you some simple steps to really take this paint job up a notch. This is the chapter master of the Blood Angels after all. If you're new to painting and you'd like to learn more about the paints and techniques used in this video, you can check out the Citadel Colour Painting Essentials videos. The paints we've used in this guide are listed on screen now. The first section of the guide will show you how to get Dante fully painted, and you can absolutely stop there if you like. However, if you'd like to see some additional steps, the second part of the guide will show you just how to do them. Also on screen now is the additional equipment we've used in this guide, but feel free to use whichever paintbrushes you're most comfortable with. And if you don't have any mediums at home, you can use water instead. Remember, this is your miniature, and this is just what we recommend. Feel free to use your imagination and paint however you like. You'll notice that we haven't fully assembled this miniature, and this is to allow for easier painting, as it'd be quite hard to reach all the areas if we fully assembled it. When we finish painting, we'll be able to put the whole thing together. For the undercoat, we've chosen to use Retributor armour. This will give us a great head start on that gleaming golden armour. You'll need a pot of Retributor armour to hand as well, and this will help us out if we make any mistakes later on. So the first thing we're going to do is take that pot of Retributor armour, and we're going to paint over all the gold areas on the miniature. Now this might seem a little bit odd, being as we've already undercoated with the spray can of this paint. However, the paint from the pot has a slightly different finish to the spray can, so if we do this now, it makes sure we can tidy up mistakes later on. This is a base paint, so we'll need to thin it down with a little bit of water and apply a couple of coats onto the miniature. The reason for doing this is to avoid clogging up all that fine detail. You don't need to worry about being neat here at all, just make sure you get the paint all over and into those hard to reach areas. With that done, we're now going to move on to the silver areas, and we'll be painting these using lead belcher. So this is areas like the weapon details, pipes and canisters, as well as any other silver details we find. Don't forget to shake your paint before you use it. This will just make sure we've got a smooth colour throughout. If you make any mistakes, don't worry, just tidy back up with some Retributor armour. You might find it easier to use a small layer brush here. This is just because we're working on some quite intricate details. And again, thin down your paint and apply a couple of layers to the relevant areas. Once you've finished using metallic paints, it's always a good idea to change your paint water. This will stop any of those shiny flakes getting into your non-metallic paints and making them shiny. And with that done, all of the metallic details are painted in. So let's move on to some other areas. Now it's time to block in all those black areas using Abaddon Black. There's loads of little details here, so feel free to refer back to the box art if you're unsure of where you should place this colour. We're painting the helmet on the base of the miniature in black as well, just to match the box art, but feel free to paint it as whichever Space Marine chapter you prefer. If you accidentally get any of the black on the gold or silver areas, don't worry, just take the previous colours and do a quick tidy up. Just remember to thin your paint down before you tidy up, as we don't want texture building up on the miniature. And now it's time to move on to the red areas. For these we'll be using Mephiston Red. So this is areas like the cloth, the pauldrons and those bloodstones. Be as neat as you can here, as it will save us time in the long run if we don't have to do too much tidying up. But don't worry, you can always easily tidy up mistakes. And there we have it, we've added in the iconic red of the Blood Angels. Now we're moving on to our next base coat, which is our white, and for this we'll be using Corax White. This will be going on any iconography and Dante's eyes too. It's perfectly normal for paint to separate in the pot, so be sure to give it a good shake before you open it and use it. And again, we'll need to thin it down and apply a couple of layers. Next, we're using Caliban Green to pick out that wreath around Dante's head. This is a lovely rich green and it will really stand out against that gold. Stick with a small layer brush here, as you'll find you've got more control and it'll help you be neater around the areas we've already painted. Now we're going to move on to Morghast Bone, and we'll be painting the parchment and the rock with this colour. This is a great choice for both areas, as it will really come together once we apply a wash later on. And once that's finished, that marks the final base coat of our miniature. Next, we're going to move on to some contrasts and shades. Now it's time to add some depth to the recesses of the armour and the red areas using Gore-Grunter fur. We'll be using this to recess shade on the armour, and this just means applying it carefully with a small layer brush into any recess detail. We don't want to apply it all over the flat panels because this will change the colour and dull the metallics down quite a lot. So by doing this, we add depth to the recesses while maintaining that nice shiny bright gold. If you do find that your lines are a little thick anywhere, just thin down some Retributor armour and tidy them back up. We'll also be thinning this down with some contrast medium, so we're using 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Gore-Grunter fur, and we'll be applying this as a recess shade for the red areas too. We've thinned it down for this as we don't want it to be quite so harsh. And if you find that you'd like some more depth in any of the recesses, just add some more carefully into them. Once that contrast is applied, you can see that the armour and the red areas are really starting to take shape, so let's move on to some other shades. Now we'll be using Norn Oil to add some depth to the white and the green areas. This is a great option for adding depth to white because it isn't too strong and it won't overpower it. When we're using shades and contrasts, we just need to be careful to control any excess pooling on the miniature. So if you find that it is pooling too much in any of those recesses, clean off your brush and use that to soak up any excess. Now it's time to use Agrex Earthshade on the parchment and the rock. We'll be thinning this down with some Lamia Medium, so it'll be 1 part Lamia Medium to 1 part Agrex Earthshade. If you don't have medium at home, remember you could use water instead. We're thinning this down just so it's a little bit more subtle. By this point, your Dante is looking fantastic, ready to lead his chapter against the enemy. However, if you'd like to follow along with the rest of the guide, we'll show you some additional simple steps to really level up this paint job. Feel free to pick and choose which parts of this section you want to do. You can follow along with every highlight or just pick a couple you want to do. Either way, your model is going to look fantastic on the gaming table. Now we're really going to make that armour pop using Stormhost Silver as an edge highlight. We'll be using this on the edges of the silver and the gold. Use the edge of your brush to pick out any hard edges. Highlighting like this means that the brush does all the work for you. For the softer edges like the muscle tone on the armour, you might find you need to go back in with a little bit of Retributor armour just to tidy up any thicker highlights. This is a great bright colour and it works over both gold and silver. Don't worry, you don't have to highlight every single edge. Just choose the more prominent ones to really catch the eye. And again, when you've finished with metallics, it's always a good idea to change that paint water. And now his armour and weapons are highlighted. Dante is really a sight to behold. Now we're going to highlight the black areas using Dawnstone. This is a nice bright grey, so it will really stand out. Just like before, use the edge of your brush where you can, as this will do all the work for you. And if you've painted the helmet on the base in black, don't forget to highlight that too. Next, we're going to use Troll Slayer Orange to pick out the edges of the red details and the bloodstones too. Don't be scared to move the model around however you need to get the right angles for those highlights. Now we're going to use Warpstone Glow to highlight the wreath around Dante's head. Take your time and be as neat as you can. If you make any mistakes, just tidy back up with the previous colours. Again, this is lovely and bright, so it will really stand out. Now we're going to use White Scar on the white details. When we're doing this, we're not just picking out the edges, we're effectively doing a layer here. And what this means is just to bring back up that nice bright white while maintaining the depth in the recesses. If you find it too bright, you can always go back in with some Norn Oil and add some more depth. Now it's time to highlight the parchment and the rock using Screaming Skull. We'll be edge highlighting the parchment just like we've been doing so far. As for the rocks, we can dry brush these. Dry brushing is a really simple technique which allows us to highlight miniatures easily. For this, we're using a small dry brush. The key here is to make sure we remove as much paint off the brush as possible. So we've just worked this off on a paper towel or piece of cardboard in crisscross and circular motions. Then when there's just a small amount of paint left on the brush, we can work this over the raised detail of the miniature. This will then catch the edges and create a highlight. When you're doing this, it's best to start off with a light covering, as it can be quite tricky to correct a heavy dry brush. Then you can add more layers until you get the desired effect. This will be quite subtle, but it'll still be a lovely highlight. Next, we're going to move on to that blue glow you can see on the backpack and the axe. For this, we're going to make things super simple using Frost Heart over the silver. The first way we're going to use this is onto the backpack straight from the pot. When you're applying this to the backpack, just drop it into the recesses here. Just be sure to control any excess pooling as we've done before. Now for the axe, we're going to start off by thinning Frost Heart down with some contrast medium. We'll be using 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Frost Heart. So we're going to apply this over the power nodes on the axe. You'll see that it's really subtle at first, and this is exactly what we want. Make sure you allow that to dry fully and then take some Frost Heart straight from the pot. When you're applying this, focus it really closely around those raised details. This will help to add more of a glowy effect. And the final step to get that blue glow is to add a white scar highlight. So just use the edge of your brush where you can, and this will help it all really stand out. If you find it's a little strong in any places, just thin down some lead belcher and use that to correct any mistakes. Now that axe is finished and ready to cleave through Dante's enemies. Next, we're going to finish off those bloodstones, and for this we're just going to add a dot highlight of white scar. This is a really simple step, and it'll just help to make those bloodstones really catch the eye. And the final thing we're going to do for those bloodstones is apply Ard Coat over them. This is a gloss varnish, so doing this will help us achieve a realistic gemstone look. And there we have it, Commander Dante is finished. With a paint job like this, your enemies certainly won't doubt who's in charge. You can see that our model is based using Sterling Battlemire. If you'd like to learn more about basing, you can check out our video all about it. For more tutorials, tips and tricks, you can head over to your local Warhammer store where our amazing staff will be more than happy to help. Or check out citadelcolour.com. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the video and we'll see you next time. Bye!